The call came at 2:47 in the morning, and Nora Reeves almost didn't answer it. She was already in her car, engine running, hands still trembling slightly from a 12-hour shift in the ICU that had taken something from her she wasn't sure she'd get back. The patient in Bay 4 had been 41 years old, same age as Nora's older brother. Same laugh lines around the eyes. She'd done everything right, everything by the book. And he had still died at 2:19 a.m., with his wife waiting in a room down the hall that smelled like burnt coffee and old grief. Nora sat in the hospital parking structure for 11 minutes before she could make herself drive. She was a flight nurse, had been for 6 years, 3 of them with the Army's 82nd Airborne as a combat medic, before she transitioned out and went back to school. She'd flown medevac missions in places where the dust never settled and the heat made the air thick as cotton. She'd learned early how to hold herself together when everything around her was falling apart. But some nights, even the training wasn't enough. She pulled out of the garage at 2:53 a.m., heading west on Crestline Avenue toward her apartment in Dunmore. The streets were empty. The city had that particular silence it only gets in the dead space between 2 and 4 a.m. Not peaceful, just absent. Like the world had stepped outside for a moment and forgotten to come back. She had the radio off. She was thinking about the man in Bay 4, about his wife, about what she was going to say to her own husband when she got home, or whether she'd say anything at all. That's when she saw the lights. Blue and red, strobing in her rearview mirror. She felt the instinctive jolt, that cold water shock that hits anyone when police lights appear behind them, even when they've done nothing wrong. She glanced at her speedometer. 31 miles per hour in a 30 zone. She checked her signal. She was in the right lane, everything was in order. She pulled to the side of Crestline, rolled down her window, and waited. The officer's footsteps were slow and deliberate. She could hear them on the asphalt before she saw him. He was tall, wide in the shoulders, with the kind of posture that announces authority before a single word is spoken. His nameplate said Garrett. License and registration, he said. No greeting, no reason for the stop. Nora reached into the glove box, calm and unhurried. She handed both documents through the window. "Can I ask what this is about, Officer Garrett?" He didn't answer. He was looking at her hands, then her eyes, the way officers are trained to do when they're looking for something specific. "You been drinking tonight?" "No, you sure about that?" "I'm sure." She kept her voice level. "I just finished a 12-hour shift at St. Benedictine. I'm a flight nurse. I'm on my way home." Garrett looked at her hospital badge, still clipped to her scrub top. He looked at it the way someone looks at a word they're not sure they've read correctly. Then he looked back at her face. "Step out of the vehicle, please." Nora didn't move right away. Not out of defiance, she was processing. In the Army, you learn to assess situations quickly, to identify whether an instruction is reasonable, or whether it's the first step towards something worse. This felt like a test with a predetermined answer. "I have a service-connected injury to my left knee," she said carefully. "I can step out, but I need to let you know I'll have difficulty with any test that requires me to stand on one leg or walk a straight line. It's documented. Step out of the vehicle." She got out. The air was cold. She was still in her scrubs, dark blue, the St. Benedictine logo on the left chest, and she felt the night air cut through the thin fabric immediately. She stood beside the car, her left knee aching the way it always did when the temperature dropped below 50. Garrett ran through the field sobriety tests with the mechanical efficiency of someone who'd done this thousands of times. Horizontal gaze nystagmus, walk and turn, one-leg stand. "I can't do the one-leg stand," Nora said again. "I told you, my knee. You said you'd have difficulty. That's not the same as can't." She attempted it anyway. She made it 4 seconds before her knee buckled, and she caught herself on the side of the car. She heard Garrett's pen moving on his pad. "I'm not impaired," she said. "I'm injured. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me." "Where?" "Downtown. We're going to do a breathalyzer." Nora looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the man in Bay 4. She thought about his wife. She thought about 6 years of Army discipline, about medevac missions, about the things she'd done in the dark that nobody gave her a medal for. And then she thought about how this was going to go if she didn't keep every single emotion she was feeling locked behind her sternum where it belonged. "All right," she said. She was not under arrest. Garrett was careful to say that. She was being asked to come voluntarily for a chemical test. She could refuse, but refusal would result in automatic license suspension. She knew her rights. She'd seen enough patients who hadn't known theirs to understand what that difference meant. She locked her car on Crestline Avenue and got into the back of Garrett's cruiser. The police station was 7 minutes away. She counted the turns. It was something she'd learned in the Army. When you don't know what's coming, track what you can. They processed her in a side room off the main desk. A breathalyzer. .00. Exactly what she'd said. Garrett looked at the number and said nothing. A second officer came in while Garrett was writing up his notes. His name was Vasquez, and he was older, with the calm face of someone who had spent a long time watching other people make mistakes. He looked at the breathalyzer result. He looked at Nora. He looked at Garrett. "What's the story?" he asked quietly. "Observed erratic driving on Crestline," Garrett said. Vasquez looked at Nora. "What happened from your side?" she told him. "All of it. The stop at 253, the field tests, the knee, the hospital badge, the 0 on the breathalyzer." Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You said you're a flight nurse at St. Benedictine?" "Yes." "You were coming off a night shift?" "Yes." "Is there someone at the hospital who can verify your hours tonight?" "My charge nurse. Dr. Okafor in the ICU. Any of the 4 paramedics who were on with me. The timestamp on my badge-out card." She paused, "And the body camera that Officer Garrett is wearing." The room got very still. Garrett's jaw tightened. Vasquez's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes, a kind of careful recalibration. "I'm going to need to make some calls," Vasquez said. He looked at Garrett briefly, then back at Nora. "Can I get you some water? It was such a small thing, such a small, ordinary human thing." And Nora felt something crack open in her chest that she hadn't expected. Not grief, not anger, just the sudden, overwhelming relief of being seen. "Yes," she said. "Please." What followed took 3 hours. Vasquez made calls. He pulled the body camera footage from Garrett's unit. He called Benedictine and spoke with the night charge nurse, who confirmed that Nora had badged out at 2:44 a.m. after working a full 12-hour shift. He looked at the footage. He watched the field sobriety tests. He watched Nora stand on one leg for 4 seconds before her knee gave out. He watched her catch herself on the car. He watched Garrett write something on his pad. Then he walked back into the room where Nora was sitting with her water cup, and he sat down across from her. "I owe you an apology," he said. She looked at him. "On behalf of this department, I owe you an apology." He didn't look away. "What happened tonight should not have happened, and I'm going to make sure the right people see that footage." Nora set down her water cup. "I want to be clear about something," she said. "I'm not angry at police officers. I spent 3 years working alongside military police in theater. I know what it means to make a judgment call at 2 in the morning when you're tired and you're looking for something that might not be there. I understand that." She paused. "What I am angry about is what happens when someone says, 'I'm injured and I'm a nurse and I just got off work and it doesn't matter.' What I'm angry about is a system where the word of a woman driving home alone at 3 in the morning counts for nothing until someone checks a camera." Vasquez nodded slowly. "That's fair, and I want to know," she continued. "What would have happened tonight if you hadn't come in, if it had just been him and the paperwork?" He didn't answer her. He didn't have to. She called her husband from the station lobby at 6:10 a.m. His name was Patrick, and he was a firefighter who worked 24-hour shifts, and he had learned years ago how to hear the thing underneath whatever Nora was saying when she called. When she said, "I'm at the police station and I'm fine, I need you to come get me." He heard everything she wasn't saying. He was there in 18 minutes. He didn't ask questions right away. He just put his arm around her in the parking lot and let her stand in the cold morning air until she was ready to walk. The formal complaint was filed on a Monday. Nora's attorney was a woman named Claire Osgood, who had spent 20 years in civil rights litigation and had the unnerving quality of always speaking in complete sentences, even when she was angry. She reviewed the body camera footage, the breathalyzer report, the field sobriety test documentation, and the hospital records. She also reviewed the written incident report that Garrett had filed, which described Nora's driving as erratic and noted that she had appeared disoriented during the stop. He wrote that she appeared disoriented, Osgood said, setting the report on the conference table, when she was driving home from a 12-hour ICU shift and had just told him 3 times that she had a service-connected knee injury. She didn't appear disoriented. She appeared tired and in pain. Those are different things. The internal affairs review took 6 weeks. During those 6 weeks, Nora went back to work. She flew 3 medevac missions. She sat with a burn patient for 2 hours because the patient was afraid and there was nobody else in the room. She taught a recertification course for trauma response. She did the ordinary, extraordinary work that flight nurses do, the work that most people only think about when they're the ones in the helicopter. She also began documenting. She wrote down every call she received from unknown numbers. She logged the dates and times. She kept copies of everything Osgood sent her. Patrick changed the exterior lights at their house and put a camera on the front porch. They didn't talk about why. They both understood why. The investigation revealed 2 things that Osgood had expected and 1 thing she hadn't. The first, Garrett had 2 prior complaints on file, both from women, both involving late-night traffic stops that had escalated to field sobriety tests on subjects who registered 0 blood alcohol. Neither complaint had resulted in disciplinary action. The second, the incident report Garrett filed contained 3 material inaccuracies: the description of Nora's driving, the notation about disorientation, and a statement that she had refused to cooperate during the field tests, which the body camera footage directly contradicted. The third thing, the thing Osgood hadn't expected, was a fellow officer, a patrol sergeant named Dwight Calloway, who had been in the building the night Nora was brought in. Calloway had not been present in the processing room, but he had heard the conversation in the hallway, and 6 weeks after the stop, unprompted, he submitted a written statement to Internal Affairs. In it, he said that when Garrett returned from the side room after the breathalyzer result, he had said to another officer, and Calloway quoted this directly, "She fought me on every test, made everything difficult." Calloway had thought about that for 6 weeks, and then he'd written it down. The hearing was held on a Thursday morning in a conference room at City Hall. Nora sat beside Osgood in a charcoal blazer, her hands folded in front of her. Garrett sat across the room with his union representative. The panel was made up of 3 people: a deputy police commissioner, a civilian review board member, and a retired judge named Patricia Holt. Osgood presented the body camera footage first. The room watched in silence as Garrett stopped Nora's car on Crestline Avenue. They watched the sobriety tests. They watched Nora's knee buckle on the one-leg stand. They watched her catch herself, calmly, without drama, and say, "I told you about my knee." They watched Garrett write on his pad. Then Osgood put Calloway's statement on the table and read it aloud. When she finished, the room was quiet for a long moment. Judge Holt looked at the statement. She looked at the footage. Then she looked at Garrett. "Officer Garrett," she said, "the footage shows Ms. Reeves explaining her injury 3 separate times before any test was administered. Your incident report states she refused to cooperate. Can you explain that discrepancy?" Garrett's union rep started to speak. Holt held up one hand. "I'm asking Officer Garrett." Garrett said that he stood by his report. Holt nodded slowly. She wrote something down. Nora was asked to speak. She stood, and she said what she had said in that room at the police station, almost word for word, because she had been saying it to herself for 6 weeks, and she knew it by heart. She said it without anger, which was harder than saying it with anger would have been. She talked about the ICU. She talked about the man who had died at 2:19 a.m. She talked about what it meant to drive home at 3 in the morning and have someone look at your hospital badge and still not believe you. She said, "I'm not asking you to make an example of anyone. I'm asking you to make a record. Because what happened to me on Crestline Avenue will happen to someone else next week, and the week after that, and if there's no record, there's no accountability. And if there's no accountability, nothing changes." She sat down. The panel deliberated for 4 hours. When they came back, Patricia Holt read the findings. Garrett was suspended without pay pending a formal termination review. The incident reports he had filed, the 3 with material inaccuracies, were flagged for official correction. The department was directed to conduct a review of all prior complaints involving late-night field sobriety stops by officers with fewer than 5 years on the job. And the department's internal review policy was amended to require a second officer sign-off on any sobriety test where the subject reported a documented physical disability prior to testing. It wasn't everything. Osgood had told her it wouldn't be everything, and she'd been right. The termination review would take months. There were appeals processes, union procedures, layers of bureaucratic time between this moment and whatever came next. But it was a record. Nora walked out of City Hall into a gray November morning. Patrick was waiting at the bottom of the steps with coffee, the way he always did. 2 cups, no cream, because neither of them took cream. He handed her one without speaking. She stood at the bottom of the steps for a moment, breathing in the cold air, looking at the street. She thought about Calloway, about a man who had stood in a hallway and heard something and spent 6 weeks deciding whether it mattered enough to put his name on paper. She didn't know him. She might never meet him. But she thought about what it meant, that one person, in the middle of a system that had every incentive to look the other way, had decided to look directly. She thought about the man in Bay 4, about his wife in the room down the hall. She thought about the next woman who would drive home alone at 3 in the morning with a hospital badge and an injury she'd already explained twice and no reason in the world to expect anyone to believe her. "You ready?" Patrick asked. She took a sip of the coffee. It was too hot and she drank it anyway. "Yeah," she said. "I'm ready."